Hello and welcome back to Dragon Talk. We have Jody Hauser on the line. Hello.
Yay.
Hello. I really like that photo. I look so serious and self-important.
Very writerly. I like it. It's like you're pondering your next play. That's what it looks like.
But that was actually an outfit I put together for a karaoke brunch. So
Nice.
Oh, close. Karaoke brunch.
I know, that sounds amazing. I want to go to a karaoke brunch.
Yeah.
it was very lovely. They do bottomless mimosas until 4 p.m. So there's a lot of comics folks who like to go every few weekends and, sing some songs and have some mimosas and good food. And it's a good time.
Do karaoke. I never actually associated karaoke with anything other than really late at night.
Right. Yeah. So it's nice to have it in the morning where you're not, where you actually can probably perform a little bit better.
But also nice to have bottomless mimosas.
That is true.
Yes. What is your song of choice, Jody?
I have an extensive song list because I've been doing karaoke for pretty much forever, but my number one best all-time song is A Lot of Miles, Black Velvet.
I don't know if I know that song.
I don't either.
Can you sing it for us now?
Let's do some karaoke.
But in that little boy's smile, like velvet.
Oh.
Yeah, that song.
Yep.
That's awesome.
That's probably about as much as you can sing without getting in legal issues. So.
well done keeping that under
that.
6-7 seconds or whatever it needs to be.
Very good.
My wife always does Only the Lonely by the Motels.
Oh,
That's
really?
one of her go-tos.
Oh, that's a good choice.
Yeah.
I don't do any.
She can rock it out. And then also Pat Benatar. Anything like in the 80s.
Oh, I love Pat Benatar.
Yeah. Those power ballad milieu is her jam.
I like power ballads because you're not really expected to dance during them too much, but they still, sort of get the room going.
Right.
Sway. You can sway.
You can sway a little bit.
I like the sway.
I'm very good at swaying. I'm not so good at dancing.
I think that I would rather Dungeon Master than do karaoke.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. That's bold.
I just can't sing.
I can't either, but you gotta. Not that this is the karaoke podcast, but you have to jump into things that you can perform. So I would do like the talk singing ones, like They Might Be Giants or Violent Femmes are good standbys for me. Yeah.
So one of my dreams is to run a karaoke RPG session where instead of rolling dice, you have to sing a song that's somehow relevant to the action you're trying to take.
Like an actual song, or do you have to make up the song?
Like an actual song, because I know there's like karaoke machines that sort of rate your score of how you sing. So it's like you have to get above a certain score based on the difficulty. I've put like way too much thought into this for something that may never happen, but.
That sounds, for those who can carry a tune and actually do the right pitches,
yes.
That sounds fun. But for me and Shelly, I think it'd be like,
I got plans that day. Sorry. Can't go. But it sounds like that would be really fun to watch.
Right.
I am all in on that.
So getting this into, when did you start playing Dungeons & Dragons and, start rolling dice?
I've been rolling dice a lot longer than I've been playing D&D. I actually came a little bit late to D&D. I got my start with more like horror and sci-fi RPGs because I think that was just more what my friends group was into.
Nice.
But I definitely was one of the people who learned most of the rules of 5th edition from watching Critical Role.
Ooh. But did you? How did you get involved with that fandom? Were you just kind of found it and started watching it, or what?
No, it's actually kind of funny. I started watching Critical Role as research because I was on a different live stream RPG show that was a homebrew sci-fi game called Vast, and I played RPGs for a long time, but I hadn't done it on live stream, and that's kind of a different thing in a way. It's like there's the performance aspect for an audience rather than just your friends. And we did our first episode. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know where I should be looking. Do I look at the camera? Do I sort of cheat toward the camera? Do I pretend the camera isn't there? So I figured, I knew of Critical Role at that point. I just hadn't really gotten into it yet. And I was like, well, let me see how the professionals do it, because obviously whatever they're doing it right. So I jumped in at an episode, like toward the end of an episode, a character had just died. Everyone was crying. I felt deeply uncomfortable because I had no context. I didn't know if they were crying for real or just in character. So that's when I sort of decided to go back and start from the beginning. I sort of described it as like showing up to a party where you don't know anyone and then find out it's a funeral.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where it's great storytelling, but if you just sort of jump in like toward the end of an episode with a whole lot of stuff going on, you can get a little lost in, just again, the context was sort of what I was missing at that point. But yeah, so I started watching to see how the pros did it, and then I just kept watching it because they're all amazing role players and performers, and now I write their comic.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So how did that leap happen?
That happened in part because doing licensed comics has kind of been my thing since my career started. I started working on Orphan Black, which was my first series, and that's sort of how I made a name for myself. So just a lot of the projects I've been offered over the course of my career have been licensed books. And I've also done a bit of work for Dark Horse. I've been writing the Stranger Things comics over there, which of course also have a nice little D&D tie-in.
Right.
And I was in the office last fall, the same time that Matt Mercer was, and I've known him for a bit. We were on a Doctor Who RPG show a little bit together. So, conversation sort of went in a obvious direction. And then when they needed a writer for the second arc of the Vox Machina Origins, they gave me a call.
That's so cool.
That is amazing.
Yeah. So you've been a storyteller for a long time. Did you always want to write and tell stories? And how did you get there before you went off to college?
I joke I started writing when I was 7, and I started writing seriously when I was 8. It was 3rd grade. I decided I wanted to be a writer in part because my teacher at the time told me I was good at it. And no one had ever really told me I was good at anything before. And, when you're 8, you're like, oh, I guess that's what I should do when I grow up then because I'm good at it. Uh-huh. And no one really told me, maybe, no, you shouldn't do that. So my parents were nicely supportive, although they did encourage me to make sure I had a way to earn money too and, not starve to death. But
advice.
For the most part, I just found I liked doing it. People seemed to think I was good at it. So I just plugged away in that direction, from age 8 on.
That's so cool. And you went to Emerson College in Boston.
Yes, I got my MFA there in creative writing, and I did my undergrad at University of Miami with an English creative writing major. Because they didn't have a straight creative writing major. You had to pick an English degree with a focus in creative writing.
Did you grow up near Miami, or why did you choose Miami?
My family moved to South Florida when I was in high school, and they offered me a really good scholarship.
Oh, nice.
That's 2 excellent reasons.
It was a financial thing more than anything.
Right.
Where in South Florida did you grow up?
Broward County. We lived in Weston, although I think when we moved there, it hadn't been named yet. So we moved to unincorporated Fort Lauderdale, which is a really long thing to write on an address.
Yes. I spend a lot of time in Jupiter, Florida, in the spring and around the holidays. That's where my dad has a place.
But I've been in LA a while now, so it's probably the place that feels the most home for me, like basically my whole adulthood.
Did you like Boston? Because I grew up in Connecticut, and Emerson was really one of the first colleges that I remember visiting as potentially wanting to go to for undergrad. I fell in love with it being just like in the middle of the city there.
Oh, yeah, I loved Boston. I didn't actually live super close to Emerson when I was going there, so I had to take the B line on the Green Line out, which is sort of the slowest of all the T lines. But, just the fact that it's so old and it's so walkable, it's sort of like this weird, magic little city. But, yeah, I loved living there, even though I ended up walking around in the midst of every blizzard that happened in the few years I lived there somehow. Just really bad luck.
Yeah. But that Boston Commons looks beautiful, whether it's, covered by snow or not.
Oh yeah, I was just back in Boston for Fan Expo Boston last month actually, and I went back to the Public Gardens and Boston Commons and did some writing, despite it being like 90 degrees out.
Yeah, the humidity and the snow. Don't miss.
Yeah, no,
Don't miss that about the East Coast.
It was kind of cool to be like doing professional paying writing in the shadow of the buildings where I went to school to study to do just that. So
yeah, that's really cool. So going back a little to when you were watching Critical Role for research, but then something must have triggered that you were like, hey, I think I might want to start playing D&D.
Well, yeah, and I've always loved RPGs as long as I've been playing them, and the fact that I hadn't played D&D was always just like a little weird because that's where it started, right?
Yeah.
So I finally found groups to jump in for like little like short sessions or one shots. And then I've fairly recently started on what seems to hopefully be an ongoing campaign. It's the typical we're all busy adults and trying to plan when we can all get together is a problem sort of thing that plagues, I think, all D&D players.
It does indeed. Yeah. Life often gets in the way.
That's good. So what kind of character are you playing in this campaign?
Right now I'm playing a rogue fire genasi who has a mysterious background that her only friend doesn't actually know yet. And I went with arcane trickster, so there's the inherent fire genasi magic and then a couple spells here and there. So she's a fun character. I might end up multi-classing into bard because that sort of fits with her background. She grew up in a circus, so there's a lot of fun stuff to do there. And I think we're at level 6 now. So, and we started at level 1. So,
and nobody knows the secret so far.
Nobody knows the secret. She was her best friend's a warlock sworn to Fey dream folk. And just as she was about to tell her best friend her secret, he got eaten by his familiar and disappeared for 6 months.
He got eaten by his familiar?
Yeah.
What was his familiar?
Got eaten by, like a magical cat thingy.
Oh.
Just ate them all up.
That's why I don't like cats.
And then she had to run their business for 6 months and like pretend to be him, which she likes. Shifting into other people, but it gets tiring after a while. So then when he finally showed back up, she was more mad than happy for a bit and didn't tell him her secret yet.
So is this a secret that you, the player, have had since you first conceived of this character, or did it come to you a little later in the campaign?
Oh, okay. So let me backtrack a bit and say how this campaign started, because that's the only way to make it make sense. So there is a brewery in Anaheim called Bottle Logic, and they do an event every year called Week of Logic. And this year was sort of like D&D-esque themed. And so when a group of us went down to pick up our little journals for the event, which they called quest journals for this year, one of our friends who DMs was like, hey, what if we just do a D&D campaign throughout the whole week? Because we're going to have to be driving from LA to Anaheim every day. We're going to be hanging around in lines waiting to get beer. We're going to be grabbing dinner. So we thought that was a great idea. So we basically played a full campaign every day over the course of a week. So it was about halfway through the week I figured out, oh, wait, my character has this crazy backstory, actually.
That's awesome.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yes, we went up about 4 or 5 levels just in 1 week, but it was about like 3 or 4 hours of play every day. And then that sort of tail ended into WonderCon, because this was back in March. So then we were already down in Anaheim for the last few days, and a lot of our friends were. So we had like a lot of friends sort of popping in and out of the campaign over the week, and we had sort of like a big finale with all the folks who were in town for WonderCon.
Oh, that's fun.
I love being able to concentrate that much D&D play into 1 week.
Like D&D immersive.
I love it.
So it's sort of wrapped with the other regular player getting eaten by his familiar, and we were all like, but wait, we love these characters. We want to play more with them. So we've since decided we will continue the campaign, but only in breweries. So it's whenever we can all get together and hit up local breweries and sit there and get like a flight of beers to try and roll dice.
I think that kind of sounds like the most perfect D&D game ever.
Yeah.
The Brew Crew.
I want to do that.
I like it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's been super fun.
are the other players also writers?
Our DM is named Trevor Adams, and he's an actor. And then the other main player is Jackson Lansing, who is a fellow comics writer. But I actually met him through RPG, so he's one of my best RPG buddies, as well as one of the people I know best in comics.
So we were talking about this, as we were preparing for this interview. I am not a comics fan. Like, I definitely had never had that growing up, and now in interacting with a lot of comics writers as well as stuff that's involved with Dungeons and Dragons, I'm reading a lot more, and I'm noticing how there's such a comparison between screenwriting, playwriting, and comic book writing. I never really kind of put those two together, and I love that you are got your finger in all those different type of writing formats out there, and maybe you could talk a little bit about how they interact in your head.
Okay, it's actually pretty interesting because I went to school primarily for screenwriting and also did playwriting while I was there and won an award doing that.
Congratulations.
So that was, thank you. It was actually cool because we did a production of the play, so I got to work with the actors.
Nice.
And
What was the play?
have a proper writing production. It was called Goodbye Dolly. And it was about two sort of weird high school kids who become friends, but their mothers end up going to war because one is a doll maker and the other is a doll collector. So it's like these two kids trying to navigate a new friendship in the midst of their family's insanity, pretty much.
Interesting. That sounds fun.
It was a lot of fun, very, very satirical. But so that was sort of my background in writing before I moved to LA. And then while I was in the midst of trying to launch a screenwriting career, like everyone in LA, I started doing webcomics, and then I got into writing for comic anthologies, and then I started getting work from actual publishers, and then I somehow had a comics career in the midst of trying to build a screenwriting career. But the interesting thing was, for me, despite having studied screenwriting and playwriting and other forms of writing, figuring out how to write comics on my own was really difficult, because I think there's a lot of mindsets you have coming in with, say, a screenwriting background where you're used to having, sound and movement and things that you don't have in comics. So I really had to almost rewire my brain to think in terms of, freeze frames, still images. There's limited actions you can show in a panel. You have to focus on the page turns and what happens when you turn the page and save the surprises for then. So It's a lot of very sort of technical comic specific things I had to learn along the way. And the thing that actually weirdly helped me the most was to think of comics as sort of somewhere in between screenwriting and poetry, because poetry is so much about placement and where lines end and limited use of space. So I think that flows very well into comics.
That's fascinating. I don't think I ever would have connected comic book writing with poetry, but you're right. And especially free form and E.E. Cummings style thing where where the placement of words are on a page have as much importance as the words themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have a lot of room for other narrative or anything in a comic. So the words have to mean something.
Yeah.
Every one of them.
And again, you're collaborating in comics. So as much as you can let the art tell the story. I mean, that's one of my favorite things with the lettering pass is when you go through and you've gotten the art and you're comparing the art with the script before it actually gets lettered by the letterer. When you find there are moments you can just take out words because the art says it all. You don't need to repeat it in dialogue or in captions or whatever.
Yeah, how does that work then do you send your rough draft of the actual dialogue to the illustrator and then they take it you kind of go back and forth from there?
Well, most of my projects are what we would call work for hire, which is like DC or Marvel or Dark Horse hires me to work on a property that they either own or they're licensing from the owner. So everything sort of goes through the editor as the central connection point for the project. So I basically will send, a pitch or an outline to the editor to say what the story is going to be. And then I tend to write in what we call full script. So it'll be like page 1, panel 1. This is what happens. This is what people say. panel 2, and so on and so forth. So it's basically a very specialized type of script writing. Mm-hmm. So, like you would write a screenplay for a movie, you're writing a script for a comic, but instead of having it be for directors and actors, it's for the artists and the colorist and the letterer and the editor. So it's a smaller team, and you can get a little more specific with your writing, especially once it's an artist and have worked with for a while. You can put in a lot of shorthand there. But I generally write full script and then send that to the editor. The editor will let me know if I need to make revisions. If a project like Critical Role, it'll get sent to the Critical Role folks and we'll get their notes to make sure it's, fitting what they want for the characters and the property. And then it'll go to the artist.
So with the Critical Role comic in particular, are you how much creative freedom do you have with story? Or is it like, here's the story, now you get to map it out in comic book form? Or do you actually have some creative freedom to come up with some of that narrative?
I mean, for this point, since it's the Vox Machina Origins and it's the game that they've already played, I basically have a synopsis of the events of the game. And I'm working with that. So basically all the dialogue is original. I'm tweaking events where they need to be tweaked to work in the comic book format. But I basically have the skeleton of the game that they played to work from.
But I imagine there's going to be so much more content than what you can actually fit in a comic. So what's your editing process like, even when you're just initially laying that out?
I mean, that's something I've had to do a lot because I've done adaptations for movies and books. So it really is just having a sort of feel for the comics medium and how to best tell the story there and being able to whittle it down. One of the classes I took in grad school was called Novel into Film. And even though that's not the specific type of adaptation that I do, it was very useful just in studying how adaptations work. And the thing that always stuck with me from our very first class, the professor said, when you're adapting a novel into a film, your most important job is to make a good film. So it always has to be about telling the story in the medium you're working with first and foremost. Like what came before is important, obviously. And like I said, it's sort of the spine, the backbone of what you're doing. But you have to make sure it works in a comic. Otherwise, there's not really a point in what you're doing.
I can't wait for colleges now to start having classes that are like live stream RPG show into comics.
That's
how to DM in front of a camera. It is. I mean, the idea of like when you're talking about the Critical Role comic, I can't help but think, wouldn't it be cool? Like, actually, Kate Welch and I were talking about this right before. When we were talking about our D&D game that we played yesterday, we were in tears laughing about it because it was the funniest, most amazing, most brilliant piece of 2-hour content that we've ever experienced.
Wow. That says a lot.
But would it be that for you, Greg, if I told you about our game? Or you're like, I wasn't there, so I don't care. It's not funny.
Well, that's the job, right? That's what makes it really hard because I think it's, taking something that is a shared experience between 5 or 6 people and translating it into a series of images on a comic book.
But I think
that's hard.
I want to see a comic book of our
well,
D&D
then
game.
We should commission Jody.
Yes. I am as you're talking, I'm like, oh my God, it would be really fun to see like Jody's interpretation of when my character unstrapped the Gnome King from her baby Bjorn and threw it at the Mimic and killed them both. And then wine exploded all over all of us. I mean,
that's something it would be
gold.
Fun to see an artist draw for sure.
Yes. Yes, it would.
And we had a lot of artists who were playing with us too. So I always am fascinated by the doodles and things that they do about scenes of things that have just happened.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, no, here's the character that you were just describing,
their
right?
Interest.
So it's all there. I think it's an amazing work that you've been doing, Jody, is trying to figure out what is the most important and vital part to bring forth.
And I think with something like Critical Role, I actually have an advantage over some of the other things I've worked on because there's just so many hours of content. Like it's so easy to go in and get the voices of the characters because there's just so many examples. Whereas if you're pulling from, say, a novel and you're adapting that, you might not even have heard the character's voice before. And for me, who works more from, you know, a lot of film and TV and streaming content, like being able to hear the voice when I'm writing is how I can tell if I'm, you know, nailing the character or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And how have you been able to, or if you have been able to use your work for comic books and other things, has it changed the way you approach character and how you portray them when you're playing with your friends?
I mean, to an extent, yeah. There's definitely character arcs I've done in RPGs where I'm pulling from stuff I got to write, or honestly just like stuff I love reading. But I honestly think it works the other way a bit better. There's a lot of writers I know who love playing RPGs because it's really a chance to sort of drill down into one specific character a way we don't normally get to do when we're writing, because, you know, you have to focus on the bigger picture and all the characters. And just getting to do this like very specific, detailed character work, I think, just makes us better when we're crafting characters in whatever medium we're writing in.
Does that ever get frustrating for you as a writer when you see another player and you're like, oh man, it would be so much better if you said this or you know, pulled on this plot thread that you're not pulling on, and the dungeon master clearly wants you to pull on. Why aren't you doing it?
Yeah, but I miss those sometimes myself. So I definitely can't like call on people. I've definitely gone back and listened to recordings of some of our sessions where I, you know, recorded it and took notes later on, where I'm just like, why didn't I, like, the DM was like looking at me and being like, do the thing, and I didn't do the thing. You know, it's like in retrospect, everything's always clear, hindsight 2020.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think when you're really in the moment, if you're just sort of having fun and playing, it's like that sort of critical side of your brain. You don't want it to be there and being obnoxious about the way other people are playing, because you just want everyone to be having fun.
That's true. I mean, I think that's freeing for a lot of writers too, right? To be able to improv out your story rather than having to make sure it all interacts perfectly with all the other little parts that you've got going on.
And it's also freeing, especially when you have a really good DM, that you're letting them take a share of the storytelling. You know, it's not all you, because so much of what we do is just sitting alone in a room typing away at a keyboard. So, you know, being able to get together with other people and tell a story, and it's, you know, even if it's you know, like a live stream thing, it's still just there to be fun.
Yeah,
it's good. I think D&D is actually very good for writers for a number of reasons, but especially for what you just said. So much of what you do is alone in your own head, and it's just good to be able to be around other people, and especially other creative people. And you can try out a lot of your material.
I tend to think of it as an opportunity for, you know, collaborative creative exercise as well as social time. So, you know, it sort of pulls double duty when you're sitting around gaming with your friends. Mm-hmm. And especially, you know, since a lot of my friends I play with are writers.
Yeah. Do you see yourself ever maybe trying to be a dungeon master yourself?
I would definitely like to. Like, I would definitely need to play a lot more D&D specifically to run D&D, I think. Like, I still feel like I'm a very new player in a lot of ways. But, yeah, I would definitely, if I had the time outside of writing, you know, like 7 to 9 comics at a time, I would love to put together a campaign.
Well, we don't want you to stop working, though.
I know, right?
Yeah, I mean, the paying writing always comes first,
yeah.
For better or worse. But I mean, for now, I'm content to just play with some amazing DMs and see what they're bringing.
Right. I wonder if you're have you ever worked with a writing partner on doing screenplay writing or comic book writing?
Yeah, I've definitely co-wrote comics with folks. Probably most prominently Steve Orlando. I did a number of DC books with him. I co-wrote 5 issues of Supergirl, which is a book I'm actually going to be solo writing in December.
Cool.
And co-wrote a couple of Justice League Rebirth issues, too.
Awesome. So I feel like that's something that Dungeons & Dragons could bring to the forefront, too, is people that you have a good collaborative working relationship with around the table, which is different characters telling the story together. I feel like it could translate pretty well to, you know, throwing different ideas out there and writing together on something.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in a way, it is like a writer's room. You're just making the story there rather than, you know, planning it for another medium.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been listening to a lot of John August and Craig Mazin's Script Notes podcast. D&D fans, of course, through and through. But the process of writing is one that's always fascinated me, and the craft of it. And I wonder if there's other things that you've learned, whether from doing the science fiction horror role playing games that you were playing to start, or D&D now. Like what, how has it informed and changed you as a writer?
I mean, I think one of the great things is when you have a character you've been playing for a long time and you still sort of manage to surprise your DM with the choices you make, even though you see it as being fully in character and it seems almost obvious to you. So I think there's something there about learning how to, have a long running character arc, but still find ways to put surprises in.
Mm.
And that's something that's like jumped out at me in games recently, because some of the sci-fi and horror games I'm in, we've been playing some of the same characters for 5 or 6 years. And the fact that I can still do things with this very long running character that again seem like the obvious character choice to me, but it still surprises other people at the table. It's like, that's really what you want to do when you're writing, right? You want to have the investment in the characters, but not have everything come across as obvious.
It's a weird fine line, right? You have to not be predictable and formulaic and calling on too many tropes, but you don't want it to feel unearned at the same time.
Yeah. So I very much is like looking at how the groundwork is laid out and the choices that came before for your character to see where it leads them, in the current state.
That's awesome. I love how that, and then you get to see that play out in real time. Like you get to see the reactions and the collaborative nature happen immediately at the table.
Yep.
Yeah. It's so much fun.
What does it mean to be a contributing writer to an anthology, to a comic anthology? Are you submitting original work to the anthology, or is it a themed anthology and you're pulling from canon of an existing property?
I think it really depends on the anthology. Like the very early work I did was for mostly anthologies that were funded on Kickstarter. The most prominent one was one called Womanthology that at the time set the record for the money earned by a comic Kickstarter. And that was all women and it was for charity. And the only theme was heroic. So you just had to find a way to work a character being heroic or the idea of what heroism is into the story. So it was a very sort of loose, guidelines for what you wanted to write. And then I've, contributed to anthology issues for Marvel Comics and Star Wars. And that, has much more strict guidelines because, you have a certain number of pages and you need to tell this sort of story with this sort of character. So it really does vary from project to project.
That's cool. Yeah, I was curious about the Womanthology one that you contributed to.
That was actually my very first published story, and half of it was drawn by an artist named Fiona Staples, who
heard of her.
Yeah, the exact same day Womanthology came out, a book called Saga had its first issue drop.
Wow!
And as soon as I read that, I'm like, well, I'm never working with Fiona again. She's way too fancy for me now. And then, of course, she ended up drawing the first cover for Critical Role, so we did get to work together again.
That's awesome. How did you end up working together that first time?
So Womanthology had a mix of newcomers to comics and professionals, and I was someone who was at the time a newcomer. And if you were a writer who wanted to try to work with one of the professional artists, you had to send a pitch for what your story idea was. So basically, Fiona picked my pitch out of a stack of pitches from writers, which is still like one of the coolest things I think that's happened to me in comics, despite all like things I've done ever since. Like the fact that a professional writer saw like a couple sentences and was like, oh, this is what I want to draw. Sure. Yeah, that still blows me away.
That's really cool. In some ways, she was the one that gave you your shot.
Yeah.
In that way.
Oh,
right?
yeah, for sure. And I always try to make sure she gets credit, even though she doesn't need it. She's way fancier than I am. But
Well, we
She's
love
awesome.
talking to her and working with her for D&D Live. It was this great happenstance that had occurred, and I think everybody here was just like, I can't believe this is actually happening. So we felt that over here as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, she loves D&D. I know, she and her husband, and I haven't played D&D with them yet, but I did play Game of Dread last time I was visiting Calgary. So
Good stuff. Yeah. So when you were talking about your friend group that got you playing RPGs, non D&D ones, and it's okay for you to talk through that, but I'm just curious about how that group got formed, and if you had reservations getting into playing tabletop games, or how did the pitch for that get you involved in it?
Well, I'd actually played some stuff back when I was in college and grad school, but, it was always sort of toward the end of the year, so it was never something that went long enough to be an ongoing campaign. And then I'd moved to LA and didn't have any friends who were playing RPGs at the time. And then I was at a party, and a newer friend, someone I knew somewhat casually, mentioned he was looking to start a Star Wars RPG.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I've missed playing RPGs from the little I played. I had a lot of fun, and I love Star Wars, so I'd love to play. And that game is still going on now, 6.5 years later.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and my friend Jackson, I mentioned earlier, I actually met him in the game. Like, our characters became best friends, and after that, we became real life best friends. So.
Aw. In a D&D game that Greg and I played in, we were litter mates. And then Greg decided he didn't want to play that character anymore, and now we're not friends anymore.
Now we're not friends at all, except for pretending here on the microphone.
You cover it up very well. I wouldn't believe that you were.
It's because we are theater majors.
It's acting.
I believe the acting. The acting is very convincing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
To be fair, I didn't know you were going to be playing that character again. And
Really?
Then when
I think we talked about it.
Oh, dang it. All right. It's my fault.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Daryl, Lost in Chult. I will find you one day.
it's really Bart's fault for not continuing that
It kind of
that
is.
campaign.
And then Nathan's fault because he didn't continue with us either.
It's true. The whole thing about getting adults together to play RPGs on a regular basis, it's for real. Like, that's the real end game of D&D. That's the big bad monster at the end.
It is time. We all fight time. Even here in the office.
Honestly, that's why I really like long-running campaigns, because I feel like there's so much inertia behind it. Even if there's like a few months you can't get together and play, people will be back just because there's so much history and weight behind it.
Right. Yeah, you got to hit that tipping point for it to be something like we're going to keep doing this.
Yeah.
We didn't reach that tipping point.
We never reached that tipping point.
We didn't.
Yeah, but you just got to do it, and you can't. It's something that everybody battles with about all their time. But you just got to stay as consistent as you can.
Yeah.
And not. I don't know. Everybody's got a little bit of social anxiety in their head, and when they're I don't feel like hanging out tonight, but I always try to push myself to be like, no, it's important to continue this game, because otherwise, if you don't, it just months will go by, and all of a sudden, it dissipates.
That's right.
Yeah, it's you got to find that balance between, well, I don't want to bug people, but you really do. You want to be like, so hey, when can we plan the next session? Are you free this weekend? You got to put that effort in, even though it's not always a comfortable thing to do. Because I get that as someone with a lot of social anxiety, but. Yeah. My love of playing RPGs outweighs my social anxiety, to the point where a friend mentions, you're like, oh, I was thinking of doing this or a one shot. I'm just like, can I play? Can I play?
Time to get in, time to jump in, and a lot of it is akin to writing projects, especially if people are not, being paid, or there's not like a deadline that's external, but having that internal deadline of I got to continue to work and noodle on this idea, or it's just going to go away into nothingness.
And that's something I know I need to get better at. And I obviously have a lot of deadlines with the number of projects I work on, but I also need to figure out how to, get stuff done when it's not fueled by panic.
Yeah. But panic gets so much stuff done.
It's such a good motivator.
Panic is such a good motivator.
It
I
really
don't know how healthy it is, but it works.
Gets it done.
When I had my theater company in New York, I called it Deadline, because it was the only way I could get things done was to have a deadline.
Yes, that's a good idea.
It just sounds so stressful, though, if that's right there in the name. It's it's always looming over you.
Well, the funny part is that I think I made like 2 plays with that company, and then it went away. So
Too stressful.
the name itself did not help it.
No.
Yeah, I was in an improv group when I moved to LA because you're required to be in an improv group when you move to LA. And our name, I think, did not help us continue because they, to be fair, the name was chosen while I was out of town at a wedding, but it was Snot Sexy. And I'm like, that's not even a good pun, and it's
No.
gross.
I'm down with that, though. I'm down with Snots.
I am too, apparently. From our earlier intro.
You were Snot Sexy when you did that.
That was not sexy. That was not cool. I guess I am kind of into that pun. But yeah, not for an improv troupe.
Yeah, I would have gone with Snot Funny, if we had to do a snot thing, because, a goal of an improv group is to be funny, so at least you get the irony in there. I don't know.
There should be more dramatic improv groups out there. I guess that's what you could call RPG streaming shows are.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I mean, yeah, it's long form dramatic improv, really.
Yeah. Unfortunately, those aren't selling out UCB performances right now. Just the dramatic ones.
Right. That would be kind of awesome, though. Do you think that the fact that, I mean, I think this is an obvious one, but the fact that your background in that you want to be a storyteller, that you have since you were a child, is that what drew you into RPGs to begin with? Was it that part of playing an RPG that you really liked the most?
I mean, I think so, yeah. I mean, I was always one of the kids that played pretend a lot, and I think that's something that, we lose as adults. And the fact that it's like, oh, you get to play pretend again, but it's okay. It's for adults now because there's rules and math. It's a nice way to make something that we all really loved when we were younger, acceptable as adults. And to be fair, it's like I do like all the strategy and having to know the rules and, working within the confines of that structure. But yeah, it is really all about, playing pretend and telling stories and, just making that work as an adult.
That's kind of thing I go to when people are like, I don't really know how D&D works. And then I just be like, hey, did you ever play pretend when you were a kid? And they invariably say yes. I don't think I met anybody who's like, no.
Never.
Goodbye, sir.
I was a very serious toddler. I was myself.
In Mother Russia, it pretend with you.
You do not have my nose. It is right here on my face. Sorry.
You do not have my nose. I just got that.
Not my nose. It's not my nose.
It's not my nose. But do you ever encounter that when you meet folks who don't play, and like how do you describe it to normals?
No, well, actually, I mean, like most of the people I know are nerds in some way or another, so I feel like most people I know get it. And honestly, like a lot of my friends who don't really play RPGs have very recently, had their first session or actually do want to jump in. So I think it's kind of cool that I don't want to say it's trendy, but at least it's out there in the zeitgeist enough that people who maybe hadn't thought about it before are willing to jump in and give it a try.
And I think that's due to people like you and people like, we mentioned Critical Role a lot, but even just, the general excitement to tell stories. I think it has a lot to do with people wanting to, not be in our world very much right now.
I mean, that's true. There is the element of escapism, but it's something that you still have control over in a way that you don't when you're just sitting down to watch a movie or, even play a video game where you have some level of control, but, the story is laid out. It's just the path you choose. Whereas, in RPGs, you're there building the story from the start.
Yeah,
it is true. And it's kind of a safe, believe it or not, it's a safe social activity if you do have a little social anxiety, because it's not just like, okay, we're just going to sit here and I have to come up with small talk and we have to think about things to talk about. Oh my God, I hope they're having fun. But because you have a game in front of you, you have a thing that you're all focused on and doing and participating in together.
There's a structure to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's you can hide behind a character to a certain extent. So there's like a layer that sort of keeps you safe if you're not necessarily comfortable in the setting.
Yeah. That's why we're pushing it as hard as we can for all of our social activities going forward.
Everybody. It's to help you.
It's for your own good.
Have you ever used your RPG playing with with your writing? Like maybe you're like trying out a new idea or trying to see how a character would really respond to the type of thing. Do you ever incorporate or do a little like of your own kind of play testing?
I mean, I actually the first time I played D&D ever, I made a bard that was sort of based off of a character from a fantasy story idea I'd had, just to sort of see how that would play out.
Yes.
And it very quickly became like focused on the game more than the story idea. But, that was something that, I hadn't really touched that story idea for a while because I'd been, swamped with, again, paying projects. But, getting to go back and sort of touch base with that character idea, I think, sort of sparked it and kept it still going in my mind. And that Star Wars game I mentioned before, I've definitely named Star Wars characters after the players in the game.
Nice.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Darth Maul murdered my GM, so.
Wow.
Good old Darth Maul.
That's a good legacy.
He thought that was cool. He didn't take offense to that, but.
So you have that kind of freedom when you're writing for like Star Wars?
I mean, to an extent, when I'm adding new characters or new aliens or new planets, I mean, I do get to name them. The story group, sort of approves everything. And at least one of the people who I named a character after, they knew and they were excited that, she was Amy Radcliffe, who does a number of things for StarWars.com. So they thought it was super cool. I was naming a character after her. So, and, look, if you can't put your friends in Star Wars, what's the point?
What's the point of life?
What is the point?
If you can't put your friends in Star Wars.
That's kind of awesome. So like you have created aliens and monsters for Star Wars.
Yes.
That's amazing.
And every time a new issue comes out with something new, like if I check Wikipedia, like fairly early in the day, there's already an entry for it, which is, man, fans are just cool.
That is so cool. I love how there's this level of fandom that, and attention to things, right? Like the day that something comes out, it's already a part of the fabric of everyone's shared storytelling universe.
I mean, that RPG show I was on, Vast, because it was running on Geek and Sundry's channel, we obviously had a lot of critters who tuned in, and we got fan art like from our first episode, and being new to this space, we were not prepared for that. It's like, they already drew the characters? But this just started. What's going on? So, but when you have like a fan base that's so primed to create the way that the critters are, anyone who sort of ventures into that space, that's going to be their experience.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Vast was the RPG that Emmett Fury was involved with?
Yes. He was one of the writers. Yes, it was an RPG with a writer's room. Basically, each session was an episode, so each writer would sort of write the module for that episode.
I remember when we went to lunch with Emmett at GaryCon, and he was telling us all the stories of how you guys have put that all together.
That's why it's familiar.
Yeah, it was.
And he's been running a home game set in that world for the past year or so, which I'm also playing in.
I am amazed at his skill at being able to balance. Well, there's like 30 different players in that game, or something.
Oh yeah, it's bonkers. And there's actually a Discord where people can talk in character with each other between sessions. So that's like a whole other thing to manage. And I think he has it well into the double digits NPCs he's dealing with for that game too. It's a lot.
I love it. I love having a fabric like that. It almost feels like, you need your own wiki to be able to, and Discord, right, and all the things to be able to keep track of all of it. And I'm hoping more people get inspired to do that for their D&D campaigns.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, but that's one of the fun things about, building a world is sometimes the world just grows way beyond what you expected. It's like it really takes a life of its own, and it's like this is a lot. I wasn't expecting it to be this much.
And I'm pleasantly surprised. Hopefully.
Yes. And then you're like, wait, this is a lot of work too, but hopefully you're doing it because you love it and you're okay and you have the time.
So you're working on 7 to 14 different projects right now that are going to be coming out soon?
Something like that. Yeah. Do you want me to start listing things?
I mean,
I'd love to know.
Give us the highlights. Give us the ones that you think you're the most excited about. You want people to know about.
Well, obviously, the Critical Role Vox Machina Origins, which is currently coming out. Issue number 3 just dropped this week.
Oh, cool.
As mentioned earlier, I'm starting writing Supergirl in December. And I also currently am working on Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy for DC. Over at Marvel, I just wrapped on a new Star Wars series called TIE Fighter. So that should be out in trade soon. And I'm working on Web of Black Widow. I just had the second issue of my 2-issue run on Star Trek Year 5 with the aforementioned Jackson Lansing as one of the showrunners for that comic. Doctor Who from Titan has been coming out, and there's a holiday special coming out in a couple months around the holidays, not surprisingly. That's a pretty good list. I feel like that's a good list.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm excited about pretty much all of what you just said. Star Trek Year 5 was something that I've been hearing about a bunch, and so I can't wait to pick that up. I think that's such an interesting idea to go back to what's happening in Year 5 of the original series mission.
And that was a cool one because we actually did put together a proper writer's room for it and broke down the whole first year of the story in one day with all the writers there. And again, it's Jackson and his co-writer Colin Kelly, who I've both played RPGs with. So I have that experience of building stories with them, and getting to do it in a very professional setting was really fun.
Did you incorporate any of the new insights into Spock's character from season 2 of Discovery?
Not really. I didn't. I think this was. I'm trying to remember if the writer's room was really before that came out or not. Because it was like at the very beginning of the year.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's always sort of a balance of when you're working on something that's still an ongoing franchise. Obviously, some of the story beats in one medium might end up, coming out before you can plan for it in another medium, but it's all trying to make everything work together. And, obviously we can adjust as things go on, and we get notes from CBS for each issue. So
that's really, it is fascinating when all of it feels like it's informing each other, right?
Yeah.
So that you can even look at the things that happen in one medium, and it informs the character to have more impact for their decisions. Or you're like, oh my God, while that was happening, all of this that's being told in another medium was also weighing on that character's mind. And when it works, it feels like this, you're just increasing that web of the wiki of all the information, emotional or not, involved in it. And it's fascinating to me.
And I mean, that's one of the great things about comics, just like with these big like superhero universes. And that's the thing that sort of drew me into reading them as a kid. It's like, well, Batman and Superman do their own stuff, but then sometimes they hang out with each other and deal with even bigger things. And that's so cool. It's like as a kid, that's just kind of mind blowing.
I love that now that level of detail and fandom is approaching RPGs and fantasy. And I can't wait for it to explode even more into the comics world. And you're a big part of that.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, that is really cool because you can go out and you can buy novels and you get new source books, and it's just, it all ties together so beautifully. And if you're running a game, it's like you can choose to pull from all that or as much as you want, or to build something entirely new.
Yeah. And with Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus just out now, that it impacts, people's memories of playing the old Baldur's Gate games, and then the new one coming from Larian and how that'll interact with it. So you're right, that web is continuing even now.
Yeah, it's so cool. I just love being a part of that sort of thing, honestly.
Well, we love that you love it.
And that you're a part of it.
Oh, well, thank you.
How can people find out about all of these myriad of projects and find out what's happening next for you?
You can follow me on Twitter at JODY_HOUSER. I always spell out my name because there's 3 spellings for my first and last name.
Yeah.
And then I'm also on Instagram at Mind Eclipse, all one word.
Mind Eclipse.
Also the
spooky.
domain of my incredibly out-of-date website that I will update someday, hopefully.
When you get back to
When you have
blogging.
Yeah,
When you want to go to your
I
live
used
journal.
To blog back in the day. It's like you joke, but I did
That was
that
a
for
thing.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us, Jody Hauser, MD. And
Oh no.
You had to go there.
I had to because I was like thinking of the different spellings
Yeah.
of Hauser. I'm like, oh, right, duh, that one. That's
That one.
Yep.
well,
Thank you for having me. Always fun to chat D&D.
yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. And
anytime.
hopefully our paths will cross again soon. And I can't wait to pick up all of these projects and start devouring them with my mouth.
Right.
Well,
'Cause that's how you
that's
do
it's good for a high fiber diet. So
You need more pulp.
Need more pulp. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jody.
Thanks,
Good
Jody.
talking to you.
thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone who has been watching all of the hilarity ensue. Shelly is not funny right now.
That is not funny. It's not funny when you pee your pants.
But why are we laughing so much about it?
I don't know.
Because it's true.
Because we're bad people.
It is. So we are not recording a Lori Should Know segment for this hour. So you have that back. You have that free hour.
Do
You can-
something productive and useful, like create some fan art for us.
That's your assignment right now, is to create some fan art of Shelly yelling at me and or peeing her pants.
Oh, no.
Possibly both at the same time.
No. Please no. Please no.
You're like, why did he say that?
I'm
That's
scared.
terrible.
I don't. Oh, okay.
All right. Well, now, yes. Thank you. You guys are the best. We will be back next week.
Yep.
I'm trying to remember who we got next week. Jeremy Crawford. And Wes Schneider.
Oh, as our guest?
They're going to be guesting.
Oh, I love it.
It's going to be so much fun.
So fun.
And then the following week, I will not be here. But
Well,
Shelly,
then I'm not going to be here.
Shelly Mazzanoble and Kate Welch
Am I
may be
here?
here speaking to someone else. With a
Well,
lot.
how can you miss that?
No, because I'm going to be at a wedding
Can we reschedule?
in New York. We're going to reschedule, drinking all at the same time. So you're going to have a good time without me. But I'll be drinking with you in spirit. That's 2 weeks
Fine.
from today.
All right,
but next week, look more to our interview with Wes Schneider and Jeremy Crawford talking about Tyranny of Dragons and what's going to be in that new tome. It's coming out October 22nd.
Okay.
Excellent.
Dragon Prophecy is the Lord should know going out on this episode.
There is going to be for this one, for the Jody Hauser one. Nice. Well, we will have a Dragon Prophecy coming at you for when we record this or when we
Lovely.
present this next week or next Thursday on the RSS feed. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We will be back next week and stick around for Binwin Plays Idol Champions starting at 3 p.m. Pacific time right here on twitch.tv/DND. Peace out.
Bye-bye.
Bye.